John Lindsay of New York, undeclared candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination in 1972. Here are the issues. When will you announce your candidacy for the Democratic presidential nomination? Can the mayor of New York run the city and run for the presidency at the same time? What are the issues that could defeat President Nixon in 1972? From New York City, the American Broadcasting Company brings you the award-winning interview program, Issues and Answers. Mayor John Lindsay of New York, who has switched to the Democratic Party and has pledged to take an active part in defeating Richard Nixon in 1972, will be interviewed by ABC Capitol Hill correspondent Sam Donaldson and ABC News correspondent Gregory Jackson.
Mr. Mayor, within a matter of weeks, your chief political strategist at City Hall will be leaving his job as deputy mayor to test the presidential waters. You said it was a major step toward candidacy. Realistically speaking, is there any reason we can't expect an announcement from you, say by January 15th, that you are going to run for the presidency?
I shall have to make that decision in January, not later than January. And that it seems to me that that in the first of the year, January, that I will have to decide exactly what I'm going to do in respect of primary contests. It is true that when I asked the deputy mayor, Dick Aurelio, to leave City Hall and set up an office trying to find out what the best role it is that I could play to be the most effective in 1972, it's clear that that represented a very important step towards candidacy.
Well, with that disclaimer, then, is it fair to say that you would not enter the New Hampshire primary and that you, if you do decide, you most definitely will enter the Florida primary, and we'll know whether you're going to by, say, January 15th?
Yes. No doubt in my mind that if I decide to go into the primaries, I shall have to go into Florida, and I would have to go into Wisconsin, without any doubt. I don't see that it would be sensible not to. And then beyond that, I would think that depend on what kind of information and intelligence that I should get from the research and studies that we make.
You know, aside from your personal political career, traveling around the country with you, it seems that your message has been, I'm a representative of the urban crisis, and all of America is involved in the urban crisis. Let's, for the moment, assume you run in Florida, that you happen to get beaten very badly. Not only what would happen to your political career, but in light of issues, may that seem to indicate that to future candidates that the city is kind of a dead issue, stay away and take their appeal to the suburbs and the farmers? Isn't there a very great risk to the inner cities, not only in your own career, I mean, but what could happen to the cities?
There is that risk. I believe that it is important that the case for urban America be made. I believe that the cities of this country represent America today. The suburbs are now sub-cities. They have the same problems that the central cities do. And I think the case has to be made, and that the needs of the country have to be spelled out, and that has to do with urban America. Now, if I should take a very bad beating in Florida or Wisconsin, which are early primaries, I think it would set back the urban cause to some extent.
Can you define what a bad beating is? In other words, how well must you do in Florida?
I don't think you can tell that, because it's apparent that there'll be a lot of candidates running in Florida. And that's healthy and good in my judgment. I think that there's part of the long process of American politics, which is scandalously long and scandalously expensive, has one plus side to it, and that is that it tends to sort things out.
Well, Lindsay, let me just follow this up, Greg, for a moment.
Yeah.
You met with Mayor Daley of Chicago the other day. Can you tell us what you talked about in terms of whether Mayor Daley will eventually support your candidacy?
No, it was as a fellow mayor, I'd never go into a major city of this country without calling it City Hall. And Mayor Daley is a member of the U.S. Conference of Mayors Legislative Action Committee. I'm the chairman of that committee. And we talked mainly about urban America. And part of the discussion was the importance of bringing the case of the cities to the front.
Well, I bring it up because when you switched to the Democratic Party, many leading Democrats, the so-called powerful Democrats, welcomed you, but at the same time said, you can't just switch and take the top spot. Can you realistically win the nomination without some endorsements from the Mayor Daleys of your party?
I would not expect to have endorsements from the Democratic leadership and the so-called powerful men of the Democratic Party. If I go into the primaries, I think it would be a very lonely road that I would be pursuing. And I think it would be, I'd have nothing except the people to talk to.
Then you would have to win overwhelmingly.
I doubt if I would not expect so-called leadership endorsement from any quarter, and that's understandable too. In fact, that doesn't trouble me because I think the politics of 1972, quite different from the politics of any other year, is a sense of maximum participation of people everywhere. It has to be very much a people's campaign. That's one reason why I think the Democratic Party has made a wise decision in opening up the choosing process as widely as possible.
Well, given this role then of carrying the message of the inner cities, the crisis of the inner cities, if you will, are you really the right man to carry it? Your staff has said that they don't feel that you can afford much more than 25% of your time out of this city. I mean, you have enough troubles running this city, so the man who's carrying that message is a man who has to run somewhat crippled.
Well, there's some gains in that. I don't see how it's possible to talk from the gut and from the heart about the pressures of urban America today unless you've lived them. I don't, if you're, to me, the streets of America and the streets of these cities is where the people are, and I think that message has to come from the streets, and in my own judgment, there's some advantage in being able to speak firsthand on the pressure pot of a big city. I think that in some ways it helps me run the city. I have a very good cabinet. I have a very good cabinet. They're first-class administrators. They're tough-minded. They're highly energized and highly motivated. And I think if I should decide to run in the primaries, it would be applauded by my own team, who feel that they can do a lot to move this great city forward. But they know that most of the keys to the doors, where the answer is to urban America, lies in Washington.
Well, Mayor Lindsay, if you should not become the Democratic nominee, whether by your own choice or because you have not won in the primaries, what type of ticket must the Democrats field? Are there any of the candidates that we know of prospectively now that you could not support, for instance?
Well, first of all, there's no gain at all, I think, in getting into the name business at this point. Were I to run in the primaries, it's irrelevant to me who else is running. The more, the better. What's important to me is what I have to say and the message that I carry. And what's important to me is who will listen to that. So I don't, it's not, to me it's not important the number of people and who are running, particularly, as I said, in a highly democratized process now. I certainly would hope that the Democratic Convention in Miami in 1972 will come forward with a ticket that I will be able to support, and that it will be a ticket that that America can be proud of, that will continually ask the question, what does this country stand for? And it will go to the root causes of the divisions and troubles in this country today.
But from what you've just said, is it fair to surmise then that you are not pledging to automatically support that ticket?
No, I've never done that in my life. As a Republican, I was an independent Republican, and I kept my independence even though I was a Republican. I chose not to support the Goldwater ticket in 1964.
Well, if you couldn't support the ticket, would you advocate a fourth party movement, or would you simply go fishing? Or...
Well, I don't think that's going to happen. I doubt if we're in that position. Again, I think that the very important steps that Larry O'Brien and the leadership of the Democratic Party have taken to open up the convention process and to return it to the people, contrary to 1968, will avoid that. And I became a Democrat because I believe that the Democratic Party offers the best hope of change in this country. I did not think and do not think at the time that you're going to change around what's happening in Washington today and in the country by an independent fourth-party choice.
Well, we'll ask you about the issues that you think will be paramount next year, but at the moment I must interrupt. We'll be back in a moment with more issues.
Let's try another letter. This time, the concerned approach. That the only song he knows? Dear Mr. Cabot, I am writing to you again, not as an agent, but as a concerned viewer who happens to represent some fine talent like Bimbo the Chimp and Wanda the Dancing Hot Dog, who have found places on other late-night shows. Now, if there's room on your show for Fred Astaire, why isn't there room for Seymour, the human spring?
Yeah.
Shut up. Mr. Cabot, you must be having trouble getting acts. Why else would you spend a whole night with Zero Mostel or Kirk Douglas? Be honest. Has Orson Welles ever skated on an oil slick? That, Mr. Cabot, is entertainment.
Our idea of entertainment is a great host with great guests, and that's what you get on The Dick Cabot Show.
See a special 90-minute interview with George Harrison Tuesday night.
Mr. Mayor, Senator Jackson has said Vietnam will not be an issue in 1972.
Well, I think it will be an issue. This dreadful, misconceived war is still on. They're still killing people. And one of the awful things that has now been predictable by many, including myself, is that as troops are withdrawn, you're going to turn into a point of crisis. There's been crisis every day, but this could be one of the worst. There have been those who've been advocating total troop withdrawal instantly. I've tried to suggest that for some years now. The Senate and others have suggested December 31 as a final deadline. Now, they must withdraw from there. You could come to a point where the troop limit, where the levels of troops were so small that you could have a terrible bloodshed of American boys. So it's not only a moral imperative that we get out of Vietnam, but it's also a must from the point of view of the safety of our troops that are there. See, the fundamental thing is that as long as the Nixon administration continues to support a corrupt regime in the Thieu government, they believe that there is some virtue in hanging on in there for extra number of months. Stretching it out. It's utter nonsense. There is no virtue. In fact, there's nothing but shame for the United States in continued efforts to say that there's something right about supporting a corrupt government that is anti-democratic and that has kept most of its critics in jail and which is damaging United States prestige all over the world.
Well, you used the word instantly. If you were president then, today, would you withdraw our troops instantly?
Right away.
Mr. Mayor, let me
get out.
Let me ask you about something about a year ago, I think you said in a speech, talking about some of the young men who had gone to Canada to escape the draft. You said that you thought they were among our best young men, some of them. Does that mean that you would advocate what George McGovern advocates, amnesty for them?
No. A lot of my citizens of New York City young men have gone to Vietnam against their will, been badly wounded, legs shot off and otherwise maimed for life. A lot of other young men, some of whom I had seen and counseled, have spent time in jail as protesters. They refused to go, but they took the consequences. Most of the men fighting in Vietnam, for the most part, are poor boys who really could not afford the lawyering luxury of taking some of those courses. You don't see the boys in Canada who are the minorities, the black and the dispossessed. They're off in Vietnam. So I don't think general amnesty is the answer. Neither do I think punitive measures in the normal criminal sense are the answers when this is all over. I tell you what I think would be appropriate. For those young men who left the country and went to Canada to come back and service in our cities. Let's have a year or two spent teaching in urban schools. Let us put them to work and work side by side with them in the ghettos of this country, with the poor people struggling for a meager existence.
Well, that's amnesty from the criminal.
That's a battlefront. That's a battlefront that is worth pursuing.
It's also amnesty.
But that's amnesty from the criminal code, is it not?
It's service for your country. And I think that service, I think a couple of years service for the country, working in the middle of Brownsville in my city of New York would be a great service.
It's redemption.
Mr. Mayor, if we can you see a Vietnam fitting into the economic picture? Do you have any confidence that as we withdraw from Vietnam, as our expenditures get less, that the plight of the urban cities will be taken care of? Apparently you have no confidence in the president. You've said the administration say cities be damned, is your word.
You're talking about the so-called peace dividend. Will there be a reconversion of all of those resources that are being poured into death and destruction abroad into the work of life and building here?
Well, into the cities,
home communities, into the cities.
Yeah. Apparently, you feel that's where
I think that's going to be a fight. I don't think that you're going to see reconversion take place all by itself. And I believe that the cause of urban America is going to be a continuing fight. The Congress is not going to, without motivation and without pressure, come around to a massive Marshall-type investment, Marshall Plan investment in the cities of this country. They're going to have to be led to do that.
Are you the leader for that? Are you? Would it be fair to say that you see yourself as really the urban leader, the one who's going to carry that message?
Well, I'm gratified to find out that the United States has a lot of people in it who care very deeply, a lot who understand the divisions of the country and the despair of the nation, who understand that unless these divisions and areas of despair and hatred are cured, that the United States will become a second-rate power, and they're willing to engage in this fight.
Well, in a sense, I really must disagree with you about you carrying that message. We've traveled around the country, and we go into these small towns, and you make this speech that the urban crisis is America's crisis, and a lot of these little towns would just soon not hear that. I mean, it's almost like you're bringing the message of cancer. I've seen less than wild applause for that speech that you've made.
Nevertheless, I say what I think.
Well, do they want to hear that?
Excuse me.
Well, in some cases they do. I think you and I traveled in Indiana together. Indiana is thought to be, by a lot of non-Indianans, as a conservative farm state. We traveled through a lot of cities in Indiana, and a lot of great cities. And we found that they had a lot of problems. And we also found that some of the candidates who were running for mayor in those cities were talking the same language that I'm talking here.
Remember that city with the brochure? I think it was Fort Wayne that said, Lord knows we never want to become like New York.
Sure, but you know what I found interesting about that brochure? Apart from the fact that it was, more or less, it was rather amusing. What I found interesting was the self-consciousness in that city about what was happening to them. And they were nervous about it. They knew something was wrong. They knew that urban America was right there in Indiana. And they knew there were problems. They knew there were divisions. They knew that there were minority people who were uptight. They knew that they were being overwhelmed with pollution, that there was no mass transit, and that housing was a problem. All of these things were being discovered. And the reason for that somewhat self-conscious brochure was because they were very much aware of what was happening
Greg,
in the country.
If we don't ask the mayor about the economy, because he's mentioned money for the cities, people would wonder why we didn't. Do you think the economy is, as Mr. Nixon says, going to be better next year? Do you think his new program is working?
Well, I hope the economy is better next year, and I hope that this program works, because if it doesn't, we're all in trouble, more trouble than we already have. My city is hurt by it. New York City has the lowest unemployment rate of any major city in the country. We're strong economically, relatively speaking, but we're being badly hurt. So I hope it works.
Well, is it a right program?
The signs are not good. It's administrative and management chaos in Washington. You do not have guidelines. We don't know where we stand. Even to this day, there are 500,000 people in the Bronx in New York who are tenants, who are asking for answers to the question on national rent control, because that's part of the freeze. Can't get answers. In fact, in Washington, they haven't even appointed a rent board yet. And when you get into the pay board area, and even worse, in price controls, there are no answers to which people can live by.
Well, what about the pay board? What about the teachers? You have them here.
Yeah.
Should they be granted retroactive pay for the period of the freeze, or raises that were due during that period but they didn't get?
You have to stay within guidelines. And the real question is what are the guidelines? We don't know. We have about 100 contracts that are right now being negotiated. We have about 400,000 municipal employees in New York. And every day of the week, we're in the midst of negotiation of one kind or another. And we settle contracts every week. We just got finished settling the sanitation men's contract. We've got firemen, and we've got others pending. The sanitation men's contract goes back several months, and we pick up where the last contract ended off. It is right that it be retroactive back to the end of the last contract. There's no reason why men should work without a contract, and the contract laboring people is a very sacred thing and has to be honored.
Then are you saying that retroactivity should be granted?
The question, sure.
Blanket? To teachers and everyone?
No, what I'm saying is that...
Who have a contract.
What I'm saying is that contracts have to be respected. And if a contract is negotiated, very often the contract period ends and you continue your negotiations, and all through the United States you've had employees who have been caught in that bind. Now, the federal government tells you that if you stay within guidelines, including for that period of time that goes back to when the old contract expired, you're all right. The problem is that they're not clear as to what those guidelines are.
We
just got through that in sanitation.
Let me just ask about...
the contract is within the guidelines in our belief.
Let me just ask about George Meany's basic position, which is that contracts may not be abrogated. All contracts should be fulfilled, meaning that all retroactivity that fell under an existing contract should be paid. Do you agree?
Again, if they fall within the guidelines, they should be.
The board's guidelines.
The board has the power to say what rate of increase you may permit for the period of a contract. Now, if the contract goes back several months before August 15, then it's perfectly permissible to have that contract, but it must stay within the guidelines. Now, if the guidelines are 5.5%, for example, then you have to figure out how do you measure that. One thing the federal government has not yet told anybody is what is the definition of 5.5%.
On this note, we have to interrupt again, but we'll be back in a moment with more issues and answers.
There are good men around who have learned that the way to stay out of trouble in a new job is to stay out of sight. These guys become experts at avoiding all sorts of decisions and responsibilities. So naturally, they don't contribute much. But there is a cure for it. You just have to start seeking their opinions. Let them know you really care about what they think.
Hey, what do you think of this?
Oh, who, me?
Yeah, you. How would you like to work with me on this?
And who knows where it could lead.
Has some ideas,
That's the way we came up with the first waterproof sandpaper.
You know, you could
And an
try
adhesive strong enough to replace rivets in airplanes.
If you could take...
Every employee comes complete with a mind at absolutely no additional cost.
Boy, this is wonderful working.
So why not make use of it?
My opinion before.
We
We
can
do.
reshape the programming.
3M Company.
We can put out twice. That's terrific.
The man who lives here is interested in history, where civilization is going, the great things men have done in the past. But his interest is not just scholarly. When it comes to 20th century history, he's been in the middle of it. He was there with the leaders at historic moments of World War II. He was there in 1960 as a moderator of the Kennedy-Nixon debates. His profession and his stature in that profession have kept him at the side of the great men of the world. In 30 years as a working newsman, he's won every major award in the field of broadcast journalism. The man who lives here knows a lot about what's going on in the world. And he knows how to share what he knows with you. He's Howard K. Smith, newsman, co-anchorman on the ABC Evening News.
Mr. Mayor, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I'm not convinced that anybody is particularly interested in hearing your message about the urban crisis in the smaller areas. For example, here in New York City, in Queens, we have a fight going on to put up a low-income housing complex in an otherwise middle-class, generally white neighborhood. And even in your own city, you've got an enormous fight against that. And yet you're trying to sell this message into small towns in Indiana.
Well, first of all, in all, we have about 150,000 families living in public housing, low-income housing in New York City. All of it is integrated. About a third of it, 30% of it, is white. That's true throughout the whole city. And as we've built the scatter site low-income housing for people with low incomes throughout the city for the past 6 years, all throughout the city, we've done so on the basis of integrated communities. This particular one in Queens, 40% is for the elderly, and almost all of that is white.
Well, I mean, you still have pickets out there. You have people throwing torches at the...
Yeah, but I'm just trying to tell you what the facts are first, and assuming you're interested, Greg, in the facts. And you've got 85% of the whole area that is covered by this is landscaped, is for recreation purposes, is for community facilities of various kinds or another. This is probably a carefully planned and well-planned development, as you find. In respect of the non-white population of that particular project, assuming that there is a non-white population, because it's mainly, if you're talking about low-income people, they're mainly non-white. They'd be drawn from the community, from the area. They're not. No one's being brought in from Harlem or central Brooklyn, other parts of New York City. They're being brought from the community of Queens, or these are people who are finding homes they desperately need. And besides this, it is clearly the right thing to do. It is consistent with the policy that I've laid down from the very beginning since I've been mayor of this city. I regret the misunderstandings about it.
Then why is George Romney reviewing it? I mean, his own department favored it, and he said he's reviewing it.
Well, I guess he's reviewing it because Senator Jim Buckley, the junior senator from New York, has aligned himself with those voices that are expressing fear and hysteria on this subject, and the senator asked the Secretary of HEW, Mr. Romney, to review it, and I regret to say that the Secretary gave in to those pressures.
Mr. Mayor, we began this program on a political note. We might as well end it that way. We've talked about your prospective candidacy for the presidency. Would you accept the second spot on anyone's ticket?
No, I'm not the slightest bit interested in being engaged in national political action with that in mind.
Well, everyone says that.
It's not my reason for the step that I took in sending Dick Aurelio, the deputy mayor, out of the government to take a look at what is happening politically in the country. It's not the reason for it, and I don't think that it's not my style. It's not in me. Besides, they say that I have the second toughest job in the nation. Why should I be interested in the third?
Thank you very much, Mayor Lindsay, for being our guest today on Issues and Answers.
Thank you.
We hope you will join us again next week for another program of Issues and Answers.
It's the